After a year, here I am with the end of the Genesis era of Sonic 2D platformers. It's not really a trilogy, and also not really the end of my classic Sonic coverage overall, so we'll just call it the end of the Genesis era of Sonic 2D platformers. What an event! Considering it's been a year, I wanted to really tie up the knots and do it close to when Sonic City's video released, and well, here we are. And by close, I mean this video got delayed a bunch. Putting all of that aside, Sonic 3 and Knuckles, the two games that make up one game, because everyone and their grandmother has already talked about the development history. I'll just save you the minutes of me pretending to present this as brand new knowledge. Yes, Sonic 3 and Knuckles forms one game that will split into two games and can be connected through lock-on technology. Sonic 3 and Knuckles has a legacy that speaks for itself. So many Sonic fans consider this the best of the Genesis era, one of the best Sonic games, and one of the best 2D platformers of all time. Other people, including people I'm friends with, consider it a mess. So without further ado, let's get into Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Most importantly, let's find out if it could be considered maybe a little overrated. Sonic 3 and Knuckles puts more of a focus on story than most of its predecessors. Not a large amount of focus on it, but instead of Dr. Robotnik is doing a bad, it's Dr. Robotnik is doing a bad on New Island, and a new foe is introduced here who wants to beat Sonic. Except unlike Metal Sonic, Knuckles goes through character growth and eventually helps Sonic. You may know it's not a very surface and plain level, this sounds similar to Sonic City's plot, and you'd be right. But Sonic 3 and Knuckles doesn't put the focus on the story through the actual plot itself, but instead on how it's presented. Transitions between zones and acts build upon the story and give you an idea of the characters' motivations and how they act, and just make the game overall more cohesive. Sonic 3 and Knuckles cutscenes never do anything deep, but they are a great addition to the game to help make it more interesting, and to make it stand out more, instead of just fading in and out between zones with nothing in between. The cutscenes never really feel like they're intrusive too, or like they're padding. The cutscenes feel organic, and if you remove them from the game would be worse for it. I know some people are going to say, but Fuse, the story is more than what you said it is. In a sense, yeah, it is for the portion in Sonic and Knuckles, but the plot in Sonic 3 by itself, it reminds us of City's plot, which isn't really a problem. However, I think it's something that should be made clear, because I often see people treat it like both Sonic 3 and Sonic Knuckles have unique plots, but I'd argue it's only really Sonic and Knuckles that does. Getting off the plot train, since that's not really crucial to a Sonic game, let's discuss the gameplay. Gameplay here is split between three characters for you to choose. You can choose between Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles. Let's break down each character's playstyle and what makes them special. Sonic is back as the character you know and love. A year ago I didn't love the sprite as much as others, but nowadays I think it's pretty clean looking and the colors work really well. It feels more detailed, but it's still simple enough to let Sonic's details show without being overly cluttered. Besides that, Sonic can use the Insta-Shield, and I know plenty of people consider it a game changer, but I rarely used it. The Insta-Shield allows you to double tap the jump button and create a very brief and quick temporary shield, and if you're great at the game, the Insta-Shield can be really useful, but I personally never really remembered to use it or found myself using it even when I did remember it. Tails is next up, and the main gimmick of Tails is his ability to fly, which is now iconic and synonymous with the character. Tails is the character I play as the least, and while there's nothing wrong with Tails and his gimmick is fun to use, I just never found myself using it enough to justify playing with my least favorite character design of the three playable characters. Last up is the newcomer to the series, Knuckles. The main ability that Knuckles has that you'll be using is his glide and ability to cling to walls. Overall, a pretty fun ability. Knuckles also features some unique stages, and I think it works really well in this cool gimmick to have Knuckles get his own stages. Overall, Sonic 3 and Knuckles has the core gameplay down stalled, and it's arguably the best it's ever been in this. All characters are easy to control, and each one offers unique skills that can be used to find secrets in this game. Yep, Sonic 3 and Knuckles has secrets everywhere, which leads me into the first main thing about how Sonic 3 and Knuckles built its levels. Levels here are designed to offer more branching pathways where if you travel down them, you can be rewarded with elemental shields that can then be used to find more secrets. These secrets can be rings, extra lives, or even sometimes while exploring you'll find big rings to take you to the bonus stages to unlock the Chaos Emeralds. As for the bonus stages themselves, they're fun and I have a pretty good time with them. They're about turning the blue spears red, and you can't touch red spears or you die. Mostly just comes down to having good reaction timing, which requires actual skill instead of something like Sonic 1 or Sonic 2's, which just felt like you had to get lucky. Plus, if you fail, you have plenty of opportunities to get the Chaos Emeralds if you explore enough. The exploration in the levels for Sonic 3 and Knuckles is usually great. Most levels never suffer from the same pitfalls and traps as Sonic C, where it feels like I can never see what's coming next, I sometimes can't find where to go, and I feel bored. Instead, Sonic 3 and Knuckles brings back the speed and spectacle of Sonic 2 to keep it from being the slower paced platforming, and mixes it with the high speed moments. I have no problem with a regular slower paced platformer, but in Sonic City I felt like I was punished for playing it like a Sonic game. While in Sonic 3 and Knuckles I feel like the game gives ample opportunity for the player to go fast and feel that thrill of speed, while never relying too much on that spectacle and knowing when to slow it down a bit and let the player explore or do some platforming. That's what really makes or breaks this game, honestly. Generally speaking, if you prefer the more straightforward level designs like Sonic 2 compared to exploring a bit like Sonic 3 and Knuckles, then you'll prefer Sonic 2 over Sonic 3 and Knuckles by a lot. However, if you like a bit of exploration, Sonic 3 and Knuckles will likely be your preference. Of course, I don't want to deceive you. I think this openness is a little over-exaggerated when people talk about this game. I mean, these are still linear 2D platformer stages. The game is normally still giving you the direction to go in. It's not like they're massive open worlds, but you do get to explore and find alternate paths a bit more than other Sonic games from the same era. I'd like to call back to a point I made of Sonic City punishing you for playing it like a Sonic game. While I still stand by that, there are some areas of Sonic 3 and Knuckles that definitely don't follow this overall example. Sonic 3 and Knuckles can sometimes feel a little boring, especially in certain zones, Sandopolis zone being the worst offender in my opinion. Pushing blocks is not fun gameplay. You would think they'd learn this in Sonic 1, but nope, they didn't. Mushroom Hill Zone, while allowing for speed, also has moments where it feels like I'm just standing there pressing jump. I don't think slowing down the player is a bad thing. There needs to be platforming to balance out the speed. Otherwise, you're just running through stages, and the game wouldn't be fun that way, and speed would be devalued. But pushing blocks or pressing jump is not really engaging gameplay to me. However, I don't think these take away a massive amount from the entirety of Sonic 3 and Knuckles, especially since at worst the game is just good, and it only really is at its worst in Sonic and Knuckles. The Sonic 3 half is usually fantastic, though the barrels in Carnival Night Zone really suck. Actually, speaking of Carnival Night Zone, I feel I've earned what I'm about to say about this. I've been mostly positive for a while. Carnival Night Zone is a contender for my least favorite Genesis era Sonic stages. It starts off fine. Quickly though, it goes wrong. Let's start the positives first. The theme and music are good, I like carnival themes. Sometimes the level can even be fun, like sometimes they actually design something somewhat competent. But the majority of the time, Carnival Night Zone feels like it's constantly stopping you and telling you not to have fun. There's these moving barrels that constantly get in your way, but the problem is they don't feel like an interesting concept or an obstacle for you to overcome. Instead, they feel like padding to the game. Just stop and wait for the barrels to move. The concept of these barrels does not change in difficulty. Instead, the concept is introduced to the player, and that's pretty much it. When you introduce the player to a new concept, you want them to learn the concept and apply that concept to new areas, and force the player to adapt and use all of their skills to overcome obstacles. The barrels do not do this at all. There isn't really a skill to stopping and waiting for barrels to move. Plenty of times this also happens in tight corridors too, so it's not like you can even get around them. Don't worry though, if that wasn't bad enough, there's this one barrel that probably stumped people. Yay. To move this barrel, you need to move the D-pad up and down, or at least I'm 99% sure that's what you're supposed to do because it's really the only thing that's worked for me. This is another example of the barrels failing. Pressing up and down while waiting until the barrel goes down is not engaging game design at all. Let's take a look at another Sonic Zone and see how it handles the gimmick better, such as Chemical Plant Zone. Chemical Plant Zone has the floating blocks gimmick. Sure, it's not super engaging at first, but it's usually pretty short, and as you progress, the game challenges your skills more. It throws in tubes and liquid to act as alternate paths, or in Liquid's case, an obstacle that can eventually kill you if you don't move quick enough. All of these challenges culminate in the challenge where you must time and plan your jumps properly on these floating blocks in a tight space, but do it quickly enough to avoid drowning in the liquid. Is this super challenging? No, but what it does is give the player an obstacle and increase the difficulty over time, which is what the barrels lack. Difficulty in Carnival Night Zone feels stagnant. There doesn't feel like a moment where it all comes together to challenge you one last time. Don't worry though, it's not just the barrels that are the problem. The level also has a bouncy segment where it's overly bouncy and has springs at the end, so you can easily get launched backwards and waste a few seconds, before immediately getting hit by spikes. I don't find that enjoyable at all. This section bounces you back and forth before punishing you at the end by taking away your rings. Then it's just barrels after, causing even more time to be wasted. Or how about the time you're speeding through the level and the game blocks your speed for no reason using barrels? It feels like, hey, now you're doing platforming, it makes sense to force the player to slow down there. But no, it's just, hey, slow down, and then, okay, now you're going up. There wasn't really much of a point to slowing the player down. I personally call this the one time Sonic 3 and Knuckles level design does fail and trip over its own ambitions. It's trying to be super linear and force you into tighter spaces like Sonic 2, but also wants to explore like a lot of other Sonic 3 and Knuckles zones. The design feels like it's at odds with itself. Sandopolis is another zone I critiqued earlier, but I don't think it suffers as much from poor and bland design, honestly. Act 2 is boring at times with the pushing blocks gimmick, sure, but the stage design does feel like it's trying to be adventurous and make you feel like you're on an actual adventure and journey. I wouldn't call it great, really, it's just fine. However, on the opposite end of the quality spectrum, Sonic 3 and Knuckles does bring a lot to the table, and that's really what brings this game all together for me. It really is fantastic at times. I think focusing on just the negatives or just the positive of a game is a poor review. You have to really balance it out. So let's take a look at the positives too. When Sonic 3 and Knuckles is at its peak, you have Ice Cap Zone. The player starts off in this high-speed snowboarding section which sets the mood for this stage being a great time. Then the level often switches between making you platforms just letting you go nuts with speed. And don't get me started on the music in this level. Take a listen. The music here is so sublime, which is a faint description for the soundtrack of Sonic 3 and Knuckles overall, actually. The soundtrack is filled with these constant moments of, wow, they must have really gone all out here for this song, this must be the peak of the soundtrack. And then the next song comes up, and I'm just really surprised with how good it continues to sound. The soundtrack for Sonic 3 and Knuckles is easily worth a listen, and is probably one of the best soundtracks on the Sega Genesis. The best metaphor for me is the Doom series. Playing the Doom series with the soundtrack on is pretty much essential for me because it enhances and puts me in the mood to complete the game's level. And that's what happens here. The soundtrack for Sonic 3 and Knuckles just puts me in the mood to go fast and tear through these levels while grooving out. Another example of how great the design of Sonic 3 and Knuckles can be is the opening zones of Sonic 3 and Sonic and Knuckles. While earlier I critiqued Mushroom Hill Zone a bit, the stage is overall still excellent. The zone has plenty of moments allowing for open platforming and skillful jumps, but it knows the right opportunities to let the player run wild with speed. Same goes for the opening of Sonic 3, Angel Island Zone. The level has plenty of sections branching off and allowing for exploration, but keeps the stage linear enough to keep things focused and avoid the pitfalls of Sonic CD's design. I think both of these zones are some of the best opening stages to any Sonic game. Overall, Sonic 3 and Knuckles is certainly a good video game. Is it a high quality one? Of course, but something about this game has prevented me from wanting to constantly play it, and I think I know why. It's the lack of a re-release. Look, it's a video on Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Of course, somewhere in this video, this will get mentioned. It's a cliche at this point. Sonic 3 and Knuckles isn't on most modern platforms legally, and because of that, it is still a game left behind, in my opinion. I don't want to imply that this game's forgotten, because it's still a Sonic game. It's not forgotten. That would be absurd to imply that it's forgotten. Sonic 3 and Knuckles is being played by less people, and that has its own problems. It's gaining a reputation as being the best one. And the problem with that is that less people are playing it, and I feel like we're starting to get less fresh perspectives on it. It's important for any game, especially one that can be called a masterpiece, to be able to get fresh critiques on it. Look at something like Ocarina of Time. So many people love that game, but you see plenty of fresh modern critiques of its problems, and that's great. That should be a thing that should always be encouraged through re-releases of this game, where we can look at this game. Sometimes we end up loving a game more years later. Sometimes we find more problems with it, but still have a massive love for it. And the problem with that is that Sonic 3 and Knuckles is not getting a chance at that, in my opinion. And another fear of mine is, it's starting to get to what I referenced in Sonic CD, where it got a reputation with it being inaccessible, and it got a reputation for just being better than it was until people actually started to play it. I'm not saying Sonic 3 and Knuckles is a bad game. It's a great game, but sometimes I feel like the conversation around it is a little unbalanced and weird. It's fine to have opinions, but I do feel like we need to have these fresh perspectives on the game, and sometimes I also fear when I see people say, oh, well, if you don't like Sonic 3 and Knuckles, odds are you just don't play it correctly. That brings me to my final point about Sonic 3 and Knuckles. In a way, yes, this is the closest to perfection the classic Sonic formula has ever gotten, and I do consider it my favorite of the Genesis era of Sonic. But it's not my favorite Sonic game, or even favorite 2D Sonic. I prefer Sonic Mania, and overall find myself playing that more often. I have a lot of respect for Sonic 3 and Knuckles. I don't really think it does anything that breaks the mold to me. I have a fun time with it, and that's it. It's not a game that constantly leaves me mind blown or amazed, except with the soundtrack normally. And I think part of that is how inaccessible this game was, and that legacy of it keep getting praised did build my expectations a bit. I don't want to take away from Sonic 3 and Knuckles' accomplishments or blame people and say that it's their fault I didn't like this game as much as others. And I'm sure some of my problems with it do have to do with me reviewing this game over 25 years later from the perspective of someone who grew up in the era of so many different kinds of games. But when I look at Sonic 3 and Knuckles, all I see is a great video game. I'm sure for plenty of people that's enough to make it one of their favorites, but for me it doesn't land that hard. Reviewing the classic Sonic games on the Genesis has taught me a lot about how I feel about the Sonic series as a whole. I do still indeed like the Sonic series, but maybe not as much as I once thought. Reviewing the classic Sonic games on Genesis has taught me a lot about how I feel about the Sonic series, and has acted as a bit of a reflection piece for me. I do still indeed like the Sonic series, but maybe not as much as I once thought. Whenever I sit down and work in these Sonic videos, it's sometimes difficult to come up with things to say. I don't absolutely hate any of the Sonic games I covered so far, but I don't absolutely love them either. I see so many people talk about their memories with Sonic and why they love the series, and I don't have that. The entire time I've been working in Sonic videos, I keep thinking there's going to be some moment where I can talk about how much I love this Sonic game. But there hasn't been, and I think there's a big reason for that, and Sonic 3 and Knuckles exemplifies that. Sonic 3 and Knuckles and a lot of the Sonic series is about skill mastery. If you master these skills, you can get through the level faster. And while skill mastery is absolutely important in any game for me, I don't want to downplay that. Skill mastery is a big deal for any game. Like for example, I love Doom Eternal and mastering skills in that game, or the Mega Man series. I value more than just skill mastery though. I need a lot of other things around that. I don't have this massive attachment to the Sonic characters, really. I mean, one of my favorite characters is Bean the Dynamite, who barely even shows up in the games. Does Sonic have a massive amount of lore and characters behind it? Yes, and I don't want to downplay that or disregard that. I think that would be wrong of me. But to me, that has never really made me absolutely love this series. I guess my overall point is, if throughout the past year or so, these reviews, it comes off as I don't care if I just don't like doing the Sonic series and I'm doing it just out of obligation, and I don't understand the games at all, I'm sorry about that. But to me, when I look at a Sonic game, I don't see these in-depth masterpieces of platforming. The Sonic games are just fun video games to me. Usually nothing more and usually nothing less, with some exceptions in between there. And that's not really a bad thing to me, really. It just means that these aren't games I constantly find myself thinking about or being excited for. Sonic to me is just a game I usually play. It's like, hey, I want a fun platformer to play. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think the series still does a really good job at a lot of things it sets out to do. Let's face it, we all have our biases, and I don't think we should all hide that we have our biases whenever we look at a game. It's pretty much impossible, in my opinion, to do a fully objective review, not influenced by your own opinions. And looking at the Sonic series, I feel like that applies to a lot of it. For example, for me personally, I really like the classic era. However, get ready for this, I also used to play the classic era a lot when I was younger. The classic era is also imprinted in me as being one of those series I did play a lot when I was younger. Same goes for the Adventure era, actually. I used to play the Adventure era a lot. Adventure 1 is a game that nowadays, I do see people say, wow, this game is absolutely broken, how can you love it? And yeah, Adventure 1 is absolutely broken, but that's part of the fun of it, of breaking the game. Or even the modern era, the era that's probably been the most critiqued out of all of them. When you look at it, I see people say, how can you love these games? They're just press one button. You look at stuff like Generations or Colors, there's more to them than that. And I think a lot of it does come down to just perspective. What do I mean by perspective? Well, let's look at it. If you're someone who's a diehard fan of Sonic, of course a lot of these games are good to you. Of course stuff like the classic era is good to you because it shows so much of what is great about the series. But if you're someone like me who's not a massive Sonic fan and has arguably fallen off the series in recent years, of course I'm going to find it not as great, because I'm going to look at it as just a platformer and not a milestone in the Sonic series. And I don't really think either side is wrong here. Earlier in the video I said that we would find out if I think this game is a little overrated, and yeah, I think it is. I hate using the term overrated because I feel that's constantly passed around, but I feel that's the best way to put it. But I can also acknowledge that part of that may be because I don't love the Sonic series to death, and to me this is just a fun platformer. I can see how this is a jump above plenty of Sonic games before and after as far as quality goes, but to me this isn't even close to being one of the greatest 2D platformers ever made. To sum it up and hopefully make my point a bit more concise so everyone gets what I mean, I think in some ways I don't love Sonic 3 and Knuckles or other Sonic games as much as other people, because they don't really fit my terms of what makes a game a masterpiece to me. I see some people accuse Genesis era Sonic fans of being stuck up with nostalgia, and I think that's a weak critique. If your only argument is that someone's nostalgic for a game and you don't have anything to support that besides, well, I don't like this game as much as you, then you're not doing a good job critiquing or showing why you think the game's worse. Of course, even though if you do have actual statements on why you find the game worse, like if you can point at the ball design and say, hey, I think it doesn't do this well, that still doesn't mean you should trash people. You should still respect their opinion. Talking about video games is fun when people do that. It's fun to be like, hey, I like a game and here's why, and be like, hey, I think this game's interesting. I agree with some of your points. Here's also why I think of the game and why I think some of these things are problems with the game. It kind of makes it fun, then you gain a new perspective on a game you love. There's a lot of good design in the Genesis era Sonic games, especially in Sonic 3 and Knuckles. The design can even be brilliant at times. I do find the conversation around this game to be somewhat exaggerated though on both sides, usually on the positive side of things. I love video games a lot. Video games are great. I prefer to celebrate the positives of games when I can, but I think it's important to acknowledge the flaws too and consider it from multiple perspectives. No game is perfect, but that doesn't stop a game from being a masterpiece. My favorite game of all time is literally the most flawed game in my top 5 favorite games of all time, but I love that game anyway. Whenever I see Sonic 3 and Knuckles be called a perfect game, I'm not really a fan of that because there are plenty of problems here. Are some of these more personal problems? Of course, but I think for anyone, you could find a few problems you have with this game, or any game really. We should always be able to celebrate our favorite video games, and I never want to take that away from anyone, but I think it's important to hear people's critiques out. Sonic 3 and Knuckles is not a perfect game, and that's perfectly okay. Well, now that I've probably made everyone hate me and I've come off as being stuck up and as someone who is trying to be different, let's wrap this up. Sonic 3 and Knuckles is still a good video game, and I do think you should play it if you can. I just find that it's overrated in some respects. I do think it does a lot right as far as design and allowing for exploration goes, but I feel that sometimes the exploration part is dramatized. While finding secrets in a lot more areas to find stuff is cool, it's not like every path does something interesting. A lot of the time it just feels slightly different. I think the areas where the game sometimes slows down a bit can be kind of boring. Pushing blocks isn't fun gameplay in a game like Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Also, a small side note, if you do want to play Sonic 3 and Knuckles, I do recommend you purchase it on Steam and play it through Sonic 3 Air. It's by far the definitive version of Sonic 3. You have widescreen, plenty of stuff that really makes it. Why wouldn't you want to play this version? I mean, if it gets a Switch port, maybe play that version. I think this game would be great in handheld, but I don't really think this game's getting a port anytime soon. Also, on another unrelated note to this game specifically, in the past 2 Sonic videos I mentioned when the next Sonic video is coming, or at least my estimate, and well, I guess I'll do that here. And the answer is, I don't really know. I think for now I want to take a break on Sonic content. Maybe I'll revisit the series again eventually, but I feel like I spent a lot of time saying things that have already been said by other people, and I don't have much to add. I have no ill will against people who review the series, by the way. I don't want to make it seem like I'm tired of people doing Sonic reviews. I think there's probably still plenty to be said about these games. Just for me personally, I don't have much to add. Maybe sometime later this year or next year I'll revisit the Sonic series and move on to the Adventure era. I do want to leave the door open just in case I feel like coming back to the series, but I also don't want to leave off a cliffhanger and say, next up we move on to the Adventure era, when I'm not really sure when or even if that'll happen. But that's all for now. So for those of you who came when I started doing Sonic content, because those videos usually are some of my more popular ones, and I'm sure plenty of you did come for specifically Sonic content, but I guess that's just my heads up. I really hope you enjoy some of the other stuff I have, but I don't know what the future of Sonic on my channel will be. But that's all for now. I'm Fuse, signing out. See ya.